Hello everyone, my name is Anna from BookSawyer and you are watching one of my two recent reads videos. So this is the first out of the two. So if you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I took about a year-long break from YouTube, and during that time I obviously read a lot of books. I'm going to be talking about at the end what I'm going to do about the books I read during 2018, but I wanted to just kind of go over the books that I read between the months of January and April of this year. So without further ado, let's just get into it. So the first book that I finished in 2018 is To Kill a Mockingbird by Albertalli. So To Kill a Mockingbird is a literary classic that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, but just in case you haven't, To Kill a Mockingbird follows the lens of Scout Finch, a very young little girl who lives in Macomb County, which is in Alabama. It's and I believe it's a fictional town, so but yeah, so it's a fictional town, and this problem has a major segregation problem, as well as the whole country during this point, because it takes place while the Jim Crow laws were in effect. And basically, Scout's father, who is a white lawyer, is assigned the task of representing a black man who has been unjustly accused of rape. And this book deals with such a heavy topic. So first of all, just a warning that it deals with racism and segregation and unfair accusations. So if you're bothered by any of that, then stay away. But this novel is so incredible in its delivery. I obviously can't speak on any representation with it, but I do think that it is a really important read, because I really think that because this was such a large time period in American history, and there are still racism issues in the United States today, I just think reading a book like To Kill a Mockingbird is really important. And I really loved how the book, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, by the way. I loved how the book followed the lens of a little girl, because Scout has lived in Macomb her entire life, and she believes that is the most precious, perfect, wonderful place that you could ever live in. And the problem is, this county has major racism issues. It's not this kind, beautiful, wonderful place that she always thought it was. It's honestly pretty racist, and there's a lot of issues with it, and so Scout kind of is realizing it for the first time. And also, she doesn't really understand racism, and she doesn't understand a lot of these real world issues, and because her father and her family is being plunged into this situation, she kind of has to realize it all for the first time. And so I really enjoyed the character development in this novel, and if you weren't forced to read it for English class, I do really hope you pick it up, because I really think it is a wonderful and an important. So the next book that I read in 2018 was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, which is the first book in her Folk of the Air trilogy. So if you haven't heard of The Cruel Prince, although it was probably the most hyped book of 2018, The Cruel Prince follows the story of Jude Dart, who is a young girl at the start of the story, but for the most of the time she's a teenager. But when she was a little girl, her twin sister Taryn and her older sister Vivi were a witness to the murder of her parents via a fairy general, and this fairy general took these 3 children into fairy and raised them, and she's kind of grown up during her time. She wants to, there's a lot to it, that's kind of the hook of it though, but it's such a wonderful fantasy story, and it follows a girl who's really she's really an outcast, I think, in this world, and I really thought it was really interesting to see a lot of the issues that she faces, because she's one of very few humans in this fairy world. But so I give The Cruel Prince 4 out of 5 stars, because I really did enjoy it and I loved it, and as you'll see in my next video, I did pick up the sequel, and spoiler, I loved the sequel even more. But I did have a lot of issues with The Cruel Prince. I found that a lot of the characters, especially Jude, were really unlikable and annoying. And I know that there are certain characters in the novel, such as a lot of the fairies, I'm going to say all their names wrong, so I'm not even going to try, but a lot of the fairies are supposed to be unlikable because they're bullies and they're mean, and you're not supposed to like them, obviously. But characters like the main character Jude, I found really annoying, and I don't know if she is supposed to be unlikable, but I really don't see why she would be, because you're following her story in this fantasy world and you're supposed to really like her. But I just thought a lot of things about her were annoying, and so that made me a little upset. Also, there is a plot point that, obviously this is all spoiler free, so I'm not going to say it, but if you've read the book, you know, there's a real not like the person that the book's named after, but there's another douchebag guy who does I know it's a plot point, and I can't be like mad at the plot point, but I'm mad at the plot point. It annoyed me so much. And also, Taryn, Jude's twin sister, is the vein of my existence. Okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there. But I do think this book is a really phenomenal urban fantasy, and I do think that if you enjoy fantasy, and if you like fairies, or even if you really want to get into more fantasy, I really do think it's a great novel to pick up, because it is an urban fantasy instead of a high fantasy. So I really do think you'll enjoy it, and so I hope you do choose to pick it up despite those couple of flaws. So if you saw my mid-year book freakout tag, then you will know that I'm absolutely fine if you want to call me a baby. Well, actually, please don't. But, like, for reading this, I like to read some middle grade sometimes. I think they're cute, and I think they're fun. And the fact that I gave a middle grade novel 5 out of 5 stars really says something for me, because I usually don't give middle grade 5 out of 5 stars, and I just dropped the book. So, I just really think that this book was really phenomenal, so I'm just gonna stop pausing. So I read Gabriella Speaks Out by Teresa E. Harris. This is one of those little American Girl doll books, and so I know that you guys all think I'm really stupid for reading it, but I really did enjoy it, and here's why. So this is the second book in their Gabriella trilogy. When they like come out with a doll, they come out with like 3 books for them, or like 6 or something. They come out with a certain number of books, and there's 3 for her, and so this is the second out of the 3. But I do think if you really wanted to just read this one just based off my recommendation, I think you could, because it does really recap really well, and it's not like a fantasy series in which if you read like the second Twilight book and you'd be like completely confused. So I do think you could read this alone, and I do think, although I did like Gabriella's first book, I do think this one is far superior. So this book, I loved it because it the first one dealt with a lot of Gabriella having issues with her stutter, and that's why I did really enjoy it. But this one, I just kind of feel like it took it to almost another level, because it was about her kind of overcoming her fear in a kind of more realistic situation, I guess. So she wants to run for, like, it's not called student government, but it's like a student government position. It's like 6th grade class representative or something like that. And so she wants to run for this position, but she has to like make a speech in front of the entire class. She has to run against her rival, who always wins everything and is really popular. And it's just, I think, a really great representation, because even if you don't have a stutter, a lot of kids really do struggle with public speaking. I love acting, and so public speaking has always been something that I enjoy, or at least in my modern days. But when I was like in elementary school, I like stuttered a lot, and I mean, I didn't like it, I didn't really like going up as much. And even though this is 6th grade and not like 5th grade or under, I do think that it still is really relatable. And I do think with this novel's like purpose of being a middle grade book, I think that it really did that, and I think the middle grade target audience would really enjoy this. And so I really do think that if you do enjoy middle grade, maybe give this one a try. But it's not like middle grade fantasy, it's middle grade contemporary. So yeah, but I gave it actually a 5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. And so the next book that I'm going to be talking about is The Tattooist of Oz by Heather Morris. So this book is based on the true story of Lolly's, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. It could be Lolly, but I believe that it is Lolly. And so Lolly was a prisoner at the Auschwitz concentration camp during World War II and the Holocaust. This is when the book takes place. And so he was kind of given the position of tattooing the numbers on people's arms, and he used this position even though it was a burden. You will see at some points that it does negatively impact him in some ways. He used it to try to help him and his lover Gita survive. And I just really was really touched by this story. There is a kind of sequel spin-off novel coming out following the one of his girlfriend's friends in the novel. I really thought that it was really phenomenal, and I do think that if you enjoy, like, this isn't historical fiction because it is his real story, but if you enjoy historical fiction or historical nonfiction, then I do think you'll really enjoy it. It is like a biography, but it's not told, it is told through Lolly's perspective. I believe it's told in first person, and so you are hearing from him, but it is a really phenomenal novel, and I do think you will really love it if you do choose to pick it up. I give it a 5 out of 5 stars because I was absolutely blown away with it. I know that it can be a really touchy subject to talk about because it is such a horrific part of history, but if you are not triggered by it, then I really do think you should pick it up. So the next book that I want to talk to you guys about is Paper Towns by John Green, which I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So you guys are all probably gonna hate me because I know this is, like, besides The Fault in Our Stars and maybe Turtle All the Way Down, this is one of John Green's most beloved books, and it's a lot of people's favorite as well, or second favorite. But this book was not my thing. I enjoyed it. Of course, I love John Green, so of course I love it. John Green, I love Turtles All the Way Down. Turtles All the Way Down is one of my favorite books. It was so good, and I love The Fault in Our Stars as well. So this novel, I just didn't like it as much. And it's not because it has a bad storyline, it's just because I think the storyline dragged on a lot. So if you haven't heard of Paper Towns, it follows the story of a guy named Quentin who is in love with his next door neighbor Margot, but she goes missing one day after they spent like a whole night together, and she has to find him. He has to find her. And so this novel is, it's good in some ways. I enjoyed a lot of my time reading it because I do enjoy John Green's writing style, and the characters, especially Quentin, I felt were really well developed. And I enjoyed following Margot because I really thought, well, even though we don't follow her perspective, we only follow Quentin's perspective, I just thought there was a lot of really interesting and mysterious things about her. But I feel like it dragged on too much. There's like a road trip like towards the end of the book, and there's like a document of every single hour of the road trip, and I don't need that. Like, I don't care. I got so bored. And also, this is like over 400 pages. No, that's a lie. It's a little over 300 pages, but it's like 303 pages. Why I thought this was 400 pages, I don't know. But I just didn't really enjoy it that much because it is, it's just dragged on too much. And I do think if this novel had been like 100 pages shorter, it would have a higher rating, maybe like a 4.5 or a 4. But I gave it a 3.5. But that's not a horrible rating. It's above 3 stars. So, but I do, even though it's not my lowest rated book of the year, I do consider it my biggest disappointment so far of the year, which I will talk about in my mid-year book freakout tag that I've already put up by this point, because I was expecting really to love this novel, and it was just the next book that I want to talk to you guys about is Dear Martin by Nick Stone. If you haven't heard of this novel, it follows the story of Justice, who is a young black teenager who was unjustly arrested by a cop for absolutely no reason. And so this novel is really moving. If you love The Hate U Give, which I know a lot of people have read and I read recently and I have to talk about, I really do think you love it. In fact, you will love it. In fact, I read this before The Hate U Give, but I still think that this is a little bit better than The Hate U Give. I still gave them both 5 out of 5 stars, but I really think this one is a lot better. I think even though it's really short, I think it's so moving, and I really think I'm a big fan of novels that can get a lot done in a short amount of time, or like a short number of pages, because like I was talking about with Paper Towns, don't drag your story on, and this novel does not drag on whatsoever. It's so short, but it's so good, and I really did enjoy it. And I there's a plot twist towards the like middle of the book that I think really sold it for me. I think that it was so hard. There's so much heartbreaking stuff that happens in this novel. It's kind of in the same boat as The Hate U Give, where it's heartbreaking and it's really hard to read, but it's a very important read. And so I really do hope that you pick it up, because I just think it is a really phenomenal novel. So the final novel that I want to talk to you guys about is Snow Falling by Jane Gloriana Villanueva. So just to kind of explain quickly why I'm using the quotation marks, is because there is a TV show called Jane the Virgin on CBS. The main character of the show is named Jane Gloriana Villanueva. In the show, she is an author who publishes a novel called Snow Falling. So either the TV, the producers, the company that produces it, I don't know, but someone hired a ghostwriter to write the novel that she writes in the show. So this is kind of almost like a piece of fan merchandise, but it's an actual book that you can actually read. It's not just the cover, in which there is a character on the show that designed this cover. So it's the same cover that you see on the show, which is really awesome that to like have, it's like you have her book. So I gave this book a 3.25 out of 5 stars, which is not great, but not bad. Because the thing is, so this novel, if it wasn't a piece of Jane the Virgin merchandise, this would probably be 1 or 2 stars, if I'm being honest. Probably like 2, maybe. Because it is not from a literary standpoint, it is not a great book. The writing was, so this is supposed to be a historical fiction novel. It's supposed to take place in like the early 1900s, and I didn't feel that at all. I like didn't get that vibe at all, and also just the writing was like, I just felt really amateur. And again, I'm not like the most genius, amazing writer ever. I'm not, but I just didn't, compare to a lot of the other books that I've read, like I just thought the writing was a little bit amateur. But I genuinely enjoyed this novel. That's why it's above a 3 stars, because I genuinely enjoyed reading it. I love Jane the Virgin. It was like I was reading my favorite television show. Although it's not like my favorite television show, it's one of my favorite television shows. So it was like I was reading my favorite television show. Like, who doesn't want to read their favorite television show? Like, that's even better than watching it. Like, so of course I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed my time reading it because I love the characters, because the characters are basically all the characters. And I know that, like, Jane was right, the character was writing it about her experience, and I kind of to go more into a con about that. I think they should have come up with a little bit more creative names, and I know that like it's the character was talking about it in her novel and these are the names she used, but Jane is Josephine, Raphael is like Ronald, it's Rake, Raphael is Rake, Michael is Martin, like Xiomara is Zara. Like, you couldn't come up with something just a little bit more creative than that? Like, I know you want us to get who it is, but if we watch Jane the Virgin, I think we'll be able to figure it out. So yeah, I was a little bit annoyed by that, but that's not really something that I took off points for. So if you're a fan of Jane the Virgin, read it. If you're not, don't, because I don't think you will like it from a literary standpoint. It's just not, if this was just a regular novel, I would be telling you not to read it. It might have even been the worst literary novel I've read so far this year. Yeah, so, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, so read this book if you like Jane the Virgin, don't if you don't. So this is everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. So I have 5 physical books that I talked to you about, plus the 2 that I don't have physical copies of because I borrowed a Cruel Prince from the library, and what, like I was saying, the To Kill a Mockingbird was a school copy that my teacher let us borrow. So I genuinely think that almost all these books are pretty good. If you are in like a certain target audience for when it comes to this one, or if you like reading middle grade for this one, then those could definitely be enjoyable. But the 3 of these books, especially these 2, I would recommend. In this one, a lot of people love this novel, so I still do recommend it. So this isn't really the bad one. The next one has some bad ones, but this is the better of the 2 from like 5 stars. Although the next one does have my favorite book. Not only that I've read this year so far, but my favorite book of all time now. I've decided it is my favorite book of all time, so I'm so ready to have you all see that, and I really hope that you enjoyed hearing me talk nonsense about books, but that's what we do here on BookTube, or at least that's what I do. At least other people's videos actually make sense, Anna. I'm so stupid. But yeah, so if you enjoyed this book, and if you enjoyed this video and you want to see some more, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed, but I understand if you don't, because I'm a total weirdo, and I get it. I wouldn't subscribe to myself either. So yeah, so I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a wonderful day.